Just for context, my sister works at a haunted restaurant. So me and my sister were on FaceTime while she was working. She works alone while she cleans the restaurant because 30 minutes prior, her and my mom witnessed the bathroom lights turn on and off by themselves, and she had a broom thrown at her. But back to my bit. She had put her phone on a shelf to show herself cleaning so I could see if anything was happening while she cleaned. At this point, all that was happening was a light was swinging while there was no breeze, so I kept an eye on it. Nothing happens until she sees the light turn on again and asks the question to the ghost, "Is anyone there to switch the lights off?" About 20 minutes later, my brother comes to my house and is talking to my sister when out of the corner of her eye, she sees something and starts crying. She doesn't know why she does this. She says she just felt like she needed to cry right in that moment. Anyway, she pointed the camera towards what she saw and my brother's face goes pale and he covers his mouth. So I got curious and went to go see. I see what looks like to be a curtain with eyes and a mouth peeking around the corner, to which it disappears. Not even a second later, it peeks back around. I can now make out a mouth, nose, and eyes. Me and my brother look at each other in disbelief and ask her to go look. She looked around the corner and saw nothing, not even a curtain. A story my mom and my grandmother would occasionally tell us growing up was about my grandfather's brother and his wife. This all happened in the 50s when my mom was in her early teens. They all lived in an isolated community deep in the Appalachian Mountains. There were large farmhouses and lots of green fields, and all carved into the top of the mountains, linked by a network of narrow, winding roads that went for miles. These communities were all self-sustaining with small country stores and one-room schools. Some of the residents never saw an asphalt road for months at a time, and some of the kids growing up there never saw one until they went to high school. My grandfather's family had a large tract of land on top of such a mountain, with some rolling hills that were cleared for corn and potatoes. My great-uncle, I will refer to him as Tom, lived in a large 2-story house on one side of the hill, and my grandfather's house was not quite as big, but was on the other side. Tom lived with his new wife that was half his age, after having an affair with her and divorcing my aunt. His new wife's name was Kathy. They met at a beer joint as they were called in the old days because people only went to drink beer. My aunt left him and took the kids, which at that time was only 3 or 4 because the rest were grown and left home. It left him alone with his new wife in the large 6-bedroom house. Their relationship didn't last long when she found out his house and land were in heirship and owned by the family, so nothing to be gained there. He had no money because the children that helped him raise corn and potatoes and sell them were long gone. Kathy had started running around on him and being gone for long periods of time, and he had had enough. One summer evening in late August, he came to my grandfather's house and asked if he had seen Kathy. No one had, of course, and he asked if he could help to look for her. He said she had gone out to pick some of the pink roses growing all over the property and hadn't returned. So they go out, my mom, grandmother, and grandfather, and help him look for her. A warm breeze was blowing as they made their way around the field, yelling her name. But my grandmother noticed they didn't spread out or go to the edges of the property to look for her. They walked directly towards the large house on the hill. Tom told my mom to go in to the house and look for her, which seemed strange, as according to him, he had just left there. She walked towards the large old house that she was always afraid to go in under normal circumstances, even when her cousins lived there. All the windows were open and the strong breeze had the curtains blowing in all directions, so it made it a little less frightening. When she walked into the open front door, she yelled out her name, making her way slowly into the house as she turned the corner into the living room from the foyer. In the living room, there was a balcony that went all around the second floor, and you could turn all the way around and see most of the doors on the second floor. She slowly made her way up to the steps, and when her head was above the second level, she turned slowly, looking at the open doors and windows till she looked behind her, and there was Kathy, laying across the bed with her head hanging over the side, and her eyes and mouth were wide open. My mom said that what made it so scary was the room glowing from the white paint on the walls and the bright sunlight beaming from all around. She said the feeling of being electrocuted and terror came over her whole body as she screamed out and ran down the stairs. She urinated all the way to the front door. It was obvious that Tom picked her to find the body. By the time the police and other authorities got there, it was well into the night, and with the heat and passing of time, and the body had blue spots all over, so the police at the time didn't know exactly how she died. My grandmother had went straight to her when my mom screamed out, and there were roses laying everywhere, and her neck was red and her eyes were bloodshot. It was obvious that he had killed her. The night they had her funeral, it was at the house. They had her casket in the large living room and had chairs from the church set up in rows. In those days in the Appalachian, they would have the wake the night before the burial, and people could stay with the body from about 6 in the evening till the burial the next day. There were about 30 people there that night, coming in and out, because in those days it was more like to get together than a wake. Sometime during the night, my grandmother had picked one of the pink roses to put in her casket with her. As she was getting ready to do it, Kathy's sister told her not to do that. She hated those roses. The room got completely silent. Uncle Tom was outside at a bonfire talking about some of the men that came and didn't hear it. He hadn't been in the house since they brought the body. Around 11 p.m. it began to rain, so he had to come in. Most everyone at that time had left, and only Kathy's sister and mother were left, and my mom, my grandmother, and grandfather. Tom was standing at the doorway of the foyer when a storm came up and blew all the curtains on the first floor waving and snapping in the wind. Everyone in the house ran around closing windows. When everything calmed down, they realized it was only a light rain outside. It bothered Tom so much that he didn't spend the night in the house and went home with someone else. The next day, they buried her in a cemetery about a mile away. He was never charged with her murder, I think mainly because of the lack of technology in that area at the time. The next year, only yellow and red roses bloomed near the house. My grandmother felt like Tom had picked those roses to try to win her back because she had lost interest in him, and she rejected him, so he strangled her. I know this was probably just me tripping, but 2 years ago I had such a surreal experience with these entities that they felt like they were real. I was having a good trip with my buddies and needed to relax a bit, so I decided to go take a shower. A couple minutes in, and I started hearing these voices speaking in cryptic tongue. Couldn't make out a word. When I opened my eyes, there were 3 of them, standing just on the other side of the shower curtain, non-moving, but all right next to me, staring at me. They really irked me, as you can probably tell, but for some reason I knew that if I just stay cool and let them be, they were just admiring me, and it felt like they could feel it. After them reaching out to me slowly, I felt like I had enough and closed my eyes, and they had left when I had reopened them. Curious if anybody else has had experience like this while tripping, and if so, have you seen what I have? I'm from Sweden, so I'm not that good at English. But anyway, one time when I was 28 female and my boyfriend 28 male was playing with a homemade Ouija board, I know, stupid, in our home we were currently living in, I asked if there were any demons with us, and we heard seconds later 3 knocks somewhere in the house. And another time, when we were about to go to bed, my BF was in the bathroom, and I was sitting on the edge of the bed. Suddenly, I felt like it was vibrating under my feet. So I jumped up in the bed, and my heart was racing. I don't know why I got so scared. Another time, when me and my boyfriend was in my mother's house, we were alone, and we heard footsteps on the stairs and someone flushing the toilet upstairs. Can they do that by themselves? One time, when my mother was alone in her house, her husband was on a work trip. She heard someone walking up the stairs outside her entrance. Then it was quiet for about 4 seconds, and then she heard someone trying to open the door. The door handle went up and down so hard that she thought it was going to break. It was at night that this happened. I have many, many more stories, but right now I do not have the energy to write them down. Maybe in the future. Me and a few friends went ghost hunting in 2020. We visited a local cemetery on a late, dark night. We only had our phone torches, and it was our first time, and it was really eerie. They spotted something moving fast, but I didn't notice it. It did freak them out nonetheless. The second time we went, we had an EVP and an EMF detector, plus large torches. We'd watched a lot of ghost adventures and found it fascinating. Anyway, we walked in the top entrance to the cemetery. I didn't bother using my phone torch because we had a proper one, so I put my phone in my pocket. Keep note the fact that it was only at 29% charge. We walked through the cemetery asking questions on the EVP. We had a small voice on the recording say, "Shush," but not much to go off. Just a feeling of being followed and watched. Near the end of the cemetery was a children's garden. Now, to make this make sense, I need to say, I've had experience around young spirits, given the fact that my brother passed away as a baby, and he grew up with us in my mom's house in spirit form, making himself known, etc. Anyway, back to the cemetery. So we approached the children's garden. Only one of a few little windmills were spinning. I felt drawn to it. I don't know why, but I did. I went up closer, but decided against speaking much. We all thought it was about time we leave, still drawn to that specific grave. I watched while we left, though the exit next to the children's garden. By the time we got out, we all felt a little bit on edge, like you would directly after a close encounter. I pulled my phone out of my pocket for it to be completely dead, which shocked us all considering the amount of battery I had beforehand. We remembered a few things mentioned on ghost adventures, such as ghosts interfering with magnetic fields and electronics, etc., when they tried to communicate with you. We didn't really go back after that. Who knows which spirit of the two we encountered were trying hard to communicate through me.